What's the word, ladies and gentlemen? This is Andrew, and today I have 10 juicy tips for new players in Overwatch. These tips are geared for the beginning players, so if you've played Overwatch for quite some time, you probably know some of these. But I figured I would make a list of top 10 things that I think every Overwatch player should know. So coming in at number 1, depending on which games you kind of come from, which kind of shooters you come from, Overwatch may be quite a bit of a culture shock. And that is because it's pretty different as far as a shooter goes. Now, one of the things that I ran into was that, holy crap, I have unlimited ammo. That's right, guys. If you look down here in the bottom left, you'll see that the first number is how many shots or rounds you have in the quote-unquote magazine, depending on what hero you use. And then on the right-hand side, the right number is going to be how many rounds you can have total. Another thing that I ran into, at least for me personally, was that Overwatch has both a mix of hit scan type projectiles and ballistics quote-unquote projectiles. What I mean by that, as far as ballistics goes, is just that, projectiles with ballistics have travel time, they have maybe even bullet drop depending on some of the heroes, while hit scan projectiles are pretty much instant, kind of point and click. So there's a mix of both. I know off the top of my head, Soldier 76 has hit scan, whereas someone like Pharah, she has her rockets, so there's a bit of travel time that comes with them. A little mini tip here, guys, is to pay attention to your crosshair size. Obviously, with the bigger the crosshairs are, that probably means the more bloom or spread your weapon has. So obviously, you don't want to take your shotgun and try to snipe someone with it. If you take a look at Bastion's crosshairs, for example, they're pretty tight, but if you hold down the trigger, they kind of expand. So you kind of want to be aware of your crosshairs and how much they bloom to kind of really figure out your range of engagement. For the second tip is wait for your teammates to spawn in. This applies more to attacking sides, but you really don't want to trickle in one by one to the enemy into the fight because Overwatch is a team game, so you're gonna need your teammates to win the fight. Now, unless your enemies don't have arms and don't have eyes, yeah, you're gonna get stomped in a 1 vs 5. So it's helpful, especially in attack, and you're trying to make that big push to really wait for your teammates to kind of catch up to you as they spawn in. You definitely don't want to go in one by one. I mean, deaths in Overwatch are pretty short, but actually trying to walk back to the action sort of reminds me of situations where you're trying to find parking in a crowded ass parking lot, only to find that one parking spot way out a mile away from the actual event you're trying to go to. So I would highly recommend making every push count. Now, the third tip is about your ultimate ability. That's right, guys, the little blue circle on the bottom center of your screen, that charges up slowly with the amount of damage you do or damage you heal, depending if you're attack or support, but it also charges slowly over time. Now, sometimes in a stalemate situation, I found that it's helpful just to poke at an enemy to try to rack up some quick points in your ultimate, even if you can't kill them. And also on the ultimates, you want to make sure you time them correctly. Nothing is worse than wasting your ultimate when your teammates are not there, or if you guys aren't ready for a big push, or if the enemies aren't there. So depending on, your ultimate, you gotta make sure all the stars are kind of aligned for your ultimate to be the most effective. So I guess for an example, as Reaper, you really want to flank your enemies before pulling off the Death Blossom. Or another example is if you're Zenyatta, you want to make sure your teammates are grouped around for that AoE heal, the Transcendence ability, so you guys can make a proper push or proper defense. Now for number 4, you guys should really get in the habit of figuring out where the health packs are. Now the health packs in Overwatch come in 2 different varieties, the small ones and the big ones. I don't think there's actually a technical term for those, but the small ones look like little cylinders, the big ones look like big squares or little pack looking like things. So definitely figure out where each of those are in maps. Really getting familiar with where they are can really help you as a player in Overwatch, especially if you're one of the lone wolf type heroes like Genji or Tracer, the ones that really can get behind enemy lines. You're gonna need to know where these packs are in a case of an emergency. Now, actually physically memorizing where these packs are, I wouldn't suggest trying to sit down and treat it like an exam. You don't have to study where these packs are, memorize them. Just play enough Overwatch, kind of explore the maps. The maps aren't that big. They're pretty straightforward. just kind of take mental note every time you come across one of these. There's not that many places where they can hide, so, you know, I found that after a couple of hours of playing on the maps, I've pretty much figured out where most of them were. For number 5, this is a quick little tip on payload maps and payload and hybrid maps. Payload, of course, is the maps where you have to guide the floating truck, the indestructible truck that will not be destroyed by anything going on in the game. But yeah, I found that 3 people on the payload will get the payload to move at maximum speed. Any more than 3, well, it's gonna be stuck at the same speed beyond that. So as sort of attacking, you may want to split up your team, you know, optimize how many people are on the payload, how many people are actually going out and killing things. That way, all 6 of you aren't stuck in the middle of a payload to get bombed to hell by a Pharah or some other AoE ability. You know, it's not good to stay clumped together. Now for number 6, this sort of ties into number 5, really being aware of your surroundings, specifically with sound and ultimate abilities. You know, with those giant AoE attacks, you can usually hear your enemy yelling out in their native tongue, announcing that they're going to do an ultimate attack. And this is really useful. Even if you can't see where the actual attack is coming in from, you can at least kind of figure out, you know, okay, they're doing an attack right now, I can kind of guess where it's going to be. There are a couple of videos out there in the YouTubes where they have a compilation of all the different ultimate sounds, but I found it's just easier to really just play the game, you know, and after a while you kind of figure out what each ultimate sounds like. Now for number 7, this one is pretty beat to death, but I figured, this one's pretty important. So it is going to be, of course, about team composition. It's good to generally have a well-rounded team. You know, you don't want 6 Widowmakers. I've actually seen that happen in a match before. You don't want like 6 Tracers. You really want a pretty well-balanced team. Now, I don't want to give any super like specific comments on exactly what proportions of what class you want, just because the meta for Overwatch, I can see it changing over time. However, I think it's safe to say that a good or strong team composition is one that is more spread out across different roles. I guess I could be completely wrong. I mean, who knows, maybe by next year, you know, 6 McCrees on defense will be the new meta, but until then, try to go for more well-rounded teams. That tends to do a little bit better, at least from my experience. For number 8, we have this is kind of hard to explain, but the only real way I can categorize this was learn the special quote-unquote side effects of abilities. Overwatch kind of reminds me of those Korean MMORPGs that I used to play, where some abilities have like a hidden attribute or a secondary use. I'll give you guys an example. Reaper and Zenyatta, they both have abilities which will grant them invulnerability, invincibility, so you can really use it to dodge certain attacks. Another example I have just off the top of my head, guys, is Symmetra's secondary shot, that big ball of death that can go through Reinhardt and Winston's shields. That's a pretty useful little tactic to know. Another one is Mei's primary fire that can go through Genji's deflect. Another one is Roadhog's hook. You can actually hook Bastion out of his sentry mode, you know, make him into a robot again. So this is just a bunch. There's a bunch of these guys. Overwatch is a pretty complicated game with a bunch of different hero and hero ability interactions. I could go on for 2 hours, but for the scope of this video, I'm gonna cut it here. But if you guys want a whole dedicated video to these, I can definitely make that happen for you guys. Let me know down in the comments. And yeah, moving on to number 9. And for number 9, guys, we are going to be talking about combos, specifically how important melee is in Overwatch. Now, currently in the closed beta state, melee does 50 damage, and that really does add up because the casting time for melee is pretty much instant. Now, there's a bit of a cooldown effect with the melee, so you can't spam the melee. You know, you cannot just keep hitting V to keep meleeing someone, but it's a great way to attack an enemy when you run out of ammo in a magazine and right between reloads. It's fantastic for heroes like Roadhog, where you can do the hook shotgun shot into melee combo. It adds up a shit ton of damage. I would highly recommend getting into the habit of meleeing someone as a finisher. It's a fantastic way to finish off someone, or at least meleeing someone between reloads. Now for number 10, the last tip for you new Overwatch players is I would highly recommend staying in touch with sort of Overwatch current events, if that makes sense. So that means patch notes, because they make pretty big patches patch changes, especially in the closed beta. I don't know if that's true on release, but it's important to stay in touch with these patch changes. I would also suggest getting into watching the pro players like Seagull. He has a Twitch stream. I've definitely watched a handful of these myself. I would highly recommend it. It's definitely a good resource for you guys who want to get better at Overwatch. Anyways, guys, that is it for my top 10 tips and tricks for new players in Overwatch. I can already tell that people in the comments will be like, but Candy, you totally missed this one and this one. Oh my gosh, you scrub. I can't believe you didn't include this. Well, come on, guys. For fuck's sakes. I'll put out another Overwatch tips and tricks video if you guys really want to. Just go ahead and submit what tips I missed and which ones you would like to see in the next tips and tricks video. And I guess for those new to my channel, be sure to check out the rest of my videos. I plan on covering way more Overwatch, and I also do a video game called Dirty Bomb. I covered lots of videos for that game as well. Be sure to check those out. And until next time, guys, I'll see you in the next one.